So you're still probably wrapping your head around exactly what an SVG is. And that's okay. As we work through this, you'll have a better idea and a better understanding of it. We're going to start simple. So what are we making? We are literally going to make a file that says hello world. Now you might say why, and that's okay. Part of this is because it is easy. When it comes to programming, and even sometimes when it comes to markup, most coders like to start with a hello world. And it's not because it's hard, it's because it is easy. So you can look at how does this particular style of coding do something so simple. It gives you kind of an idea of how things work before you try to do anything sophisticated. So what do you need? We need that text editor. So text edit, notepad, you can get brackets if you want, but don't use Word, don't use WordPad, don't use Pages. You need a plain text editor. Now if you're on the Mac and you're using text edit, we need to do something before it's ready, because text edit on the Mac is sort of like Notepad and WordPad from the PC together in one. And that's fine unless you want to edit code. So let's take a look at that. So I am going to use text edit. If your text edit looks like this, perfect, it's ready. You can go ahead and start. But if your text edit looks like this, not good. So all of these little options, they're nice, but they add code into the file itself, so that way your computer knows how to display the text, whether you want it to be in Helvetica or Baskerville or Georgia or whatever font, and what size you want, and the weight and the color and all that stuff. It might be fun to play with, but it causes problems for code. So what we need to do is go to text edit at the top, go to preferences, and we need to change this to plain text. If you have some of these things marked, I would just go ahead and make sure they're all disabled. Window size is your choice, doesn't matter. That really doesn't matter, that's really a preference for you. Go to open and save. Make sure that this .txt file is not marked. It shouldn't add it to yours anyways, but it's just safer to leave it not marked in case you forget to add your own extension. And the rest of this looks okay. Now you might say, I checked those and nothing happened, and that's correct. Nothing happened. What we actually need to do is we need to quit text edit, and we're going to relaunch it. There we go, nice and plain, no extra features, and this is what it should look like. If you're on the PC, this is what Notepad should look like too. If you had all those extra things up there, you're probably in WordPad or something else, and that's going to cause problems. So it needs to look like this. If you're having trouble with that, maybe try getting brackets instead. What we're going to do actually, this is about SVG and not other things, but we're going to wrap an HTML file around this just to simplify some things. Doing an SVG all by itself requires some extra code that I don't want to get into right now. But if we wrap it in HTML, so HTML is just a web page, and we're going to keep it very, very simple, don't worry. So we're going to start with a left angle bracket. It's near your right shift key. We're going to type HTML. We're going to do right angle bracket. So this is a tag. Sometimes you have two tags for an element. Some elements are only one tag. This happens to require two tags for this HTML element, an opening tag and a closing tag. To close it, we're just going to make a line break, start on a new line, open a new tag using the left angle bracket, type a slash first, that signifies closing, once again HTML, right angle bracket to close this tag. So these two together complete this element. Now inside of this element, we're going to add a little bit of space, and I like to use a little bit of white space, a little bit of spacing to make this a little bit easier to read. So I'm going to put a couple spaces. 3 or 4 is usually the standard. Some people like to use tabs, but that can be a little weird on certain software, so I like to use actual space bars. We're going to add a new element, and that is body. So another left angle bracket to start the tag, write the word body, right angle bracket to close the tag. This is an element that has a closing tag as well as the opening tag, so we'll do another line break, couple spaces, left angle bracket slash body, right angle bracket. So now this element is complete. Now inside of this element, we're going to nest another element. So add in some space here. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to add another 3 because this is inside of that other one. 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be SVG, the SVG element. And this is where we can actually start doing SVG code. This also has to be closed. So this HTML tag up here tells the computer to start reading this as HTML. This SVG tag, however, is going to tell the computer instead that, hey, now we're going to have some SVG code and you need to read it like SVG. But that also means that eventually it's going to stop reading SVG, and so we have to tell it when to stop reading SVG. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this will be slash SVG. So that way it knows once it hits this that it is no longer SVG code. It's going to go back to this HTML code until it gets down to here, and it's going to then stop reading HTML. Now you might say, so is body also a code? No, body's not also a code. Body is like the main section of our web page. So this is not its own form of coding. This is just the main section of our web page, which is going to have an SVG graphic in it, and that's all it's going to be there. Now this might sound a little confusing so far. That's okay. It's okay if you're a little confused. Just move along with us and you'll get the hang of it. So here is our SVG code. Right now there's nothing in it. All ours is going to do is say hello world. So add a new line break. I'm going to add some spaces in here. This is inside of the SVG code, so I'm going to add another 3 spaces. You don't have to do this. You don't have to have these spaces in here, but I think it's cleaner and easier to read. So this is going to be text. So we start with the left angle bracket again. We write the word text, right angle bracket. We close this the same way we closed all the others. Left angle bracket slash text. And now this is closed. Now we actually want it to say something. I can run this right now and it will run. But there's going to be nothing in it because there's nothing in it. There's nothing here. So this is where I'm going to write hello world. And you can have this say whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. File save. And this will be hello world.html because this is inside of an HTML file. We could make just an SVG file on its own, but that adds some extra complexity into what you need to add into here, and I don't want to worry about that right now. So just hello world.html. I like to save on my desktop. Where you want to save is up to you, but I think it's easier for you guys if I save there, because then I don't have to go hunting for it. Alright, so here is my hello world.html file. I can right click and open in Firefox. And there we go. And you might say, well, where is it? Well, yeah, but actually it is there. The thing is, I didn't tell it where to load. So it loaded at the very top of the screen, and if you look right here, you see those little dots? Let's zoom in a bit. This is the bottom of my hello world. That's a D. That's probably the W. That should be the W. W. I think that's the bottom of the O. W-O-R-L-D. Probably the E, and that's probably the O. Yeah. So we can't see the H at all. We can't see the L's at all. And you might say, well, that's worthless. Why did I bother doing that? And, well, yeah, we can't see it right now. But it worked. It did work. We just have to figure out how to tell it where to load. So the way that it works is because we didn't tell it where to load, it loaded in the very top left of the screen, which is 0, 0. But font doesn't load starting at the top left of the font itself. It loads it from the bottom, so it puts the very bottom at the very top of the top left. So what we need to do is we need to tell it where to load, and we do that using coordinates. An X coordinate and a Y coordinate. So the X coordinate will tell it how far to the right we want it to move, and the Y coordinate will tell it how far down we want it to load on screen. So let's try it. So if we go back to our text, We can tell it X. And I don't think the X was really that big of a deal. It looked fine, so I'll just go with 5 for short. And I'll tell it Y, and that equals, and inside of quotes, let's say maybe 20. And you might say, like, what measurement is this? Is this like inches or feet or centimeters or millimeters? What is this? These are pixels. Now, how big those pixels are going to be is going to depend on how large you have your screen set to and how zoomed in or out you have your browser set to. But you can play with that on your own. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to reopen Hello World in Firefox. There we go. Now yours might be small. Yours might look more like this. I've hit Command plus quite a few times, so that way it's easy to see and much, much larger. Now I can go back into text edit and I can play with these values. So I can change this to 25 and I can change this to 10. And I can Command S for save or Control S if you're on a PC. And I can refresh it. And you can see where it went now. Now part of this Hello World is cut off because of my Y value. So that's kind of part of that thing. It's loading Hello World on the bottom line at Y10. And so 10 is actually not large enough to show all of it. So if I make this even smaller, like 5, and I refresh, we lose even more of it. You figure out what coordinates you want to get it to load where in your browser that you want. So we did it. We have Hello World. And you might say, well, is that it? Well, that's up to you. So you can change the word. You can try to figure out how many letters can you add in there before you run out of space. What happens if you put too many letters in there? Does it make a new line or does it just run off the page? Try it out, see what happens. Can you add multiple text elements? And what happens if you put two on top of one another? What happens if you have one at like Y10 and another's at like Y13? See what happens. Play with it some. Hopefully you're trying to wrap your head around how it works. It will get easier as we go along, and as things get easier, we can do more interesting things. In the next video, we will play with adding a shape.